just a quick intro before we get going on. My name is Quantel Langford. I'm originally from Cleveland, Tennessee, so I'm from the South. Been out here in Oceanside for about going on 6 years now. And I run Langfordesign. It is a branding and creative studio. I work with a lot of small businesses, actually small to medium-sized businesses, a lot of schools, organizations, and personal brands as well, and helping to create a visual identity for their business. And that goes from logo design all the way up to social media graphics to web work. So like I said, I've been fortunate to be able to work in all kinds of different facets, and really just helping people build their brands and really create results for their business. So the Creative Brew is actually something I had started while I was out here, and the sort of a weird little brainchild from just talking with my wife, and I was actually at a craft brewery, and we were just talking, and I was like, well, what if I just made up a podcast I've always wanted to get into podcasting, and I was like, well, what if I made a podcast about just getting people just around the area and sharing their journeys, helping promote them, and really just getting insights from various people. I've always seen myself as a lifelong learner, and I love just getting insights from other people and sort of absorbing that into me and as far as what I do. So I just started it, and now it's been going on about 3 years now. So very fortunate to just stay consistent. It's currently now on a online radio station called Helium Radio, which is actually based out of Florida. It's an online radio station, and it airs every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So that's something else I always have to put on my plate alongside with all the client work and things like that. But I do enjoy helping others. I enjoy getting insights from others, and then being able to share that to others. That's been a great passion of mine. And so with this presentation, I want to be able to help others, if they're thinking about starting their own podcast and using that to sort of leverage that podcast for their own personal brand or for their business organization. This is something that I hope helps. So let's share the screen here. And share. All right, does everybody see the screen? Okay. So we'll get going here. Once again, launching a successful podcast for small businesses with me, Quantel Langford. So I'll go into it. What is podcasting? And podcasting is audio content, video or audio content. And I'll sort of explain a little bit later. You can either do either or you can do both. If you're an ambitious soul, I do both. Sometimes it takes some work, but it's either audio or video content that can be created to be distributed through the internet and stream through any portable devices. And then with podcasting, it's very convenient. Even with Hannah, she was listening to it on her drive. So I know I'm a podcast junkie. I'll sit there, I'll listen to it while I'm working out, and I'll listen to a 45-minute podcast, and just while I'm running or working out. So it's real convenient, and it's something to where, especially with people, they're always on the go. I really believe with audio and video, it's really going to get bigger. So I think just now, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I think this would be a great time now to sort of leverage that and build, your brand awareness, or even start something new. It is completely up to you. So with podcasting, and I won't go into specifics with everything, but generally with podcasting, it's generally streamed or syndicated through a RSS feed that you can use, and you can plug that into various platforms, and it pretty much streams and distributes your content, in various places. And right now with technology, there's literally, I'll show you what I use, but there's, and Benny knows, there's all kinds of options to choose from for, podcast platforms. So there is no right or wrong to anything. It's just whatever feels good for you, whatever is more user friendly, and what you feel comfortable with. You may migrate to other platforms or other techniques, or software, hardware. But yeah, I mean, just whatever is easiest for you. And as long as I'm real big on content over quality. So if you can just put out the content and it's something that resonates with me, I'm going to listen to it. Now, at the same time too, I don't want it to be like, all garbled and things like that. But if it's decent quality and it's something that like, hey, I connect with that, that's something that interests me, I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to it. So don't feel like you have to get hundreds of $1,000s of equipment. No, you don't have to do that. With now, and I'll give a couple of statistics right now, and this is from Edison Research. You got 51% of Americans over the age of 12 have listened to a podcast. 32% of Americans listen to a podcast at least once a month. That's me included in there. I listen to about at least 4 or 5 podcasts, and I'm gonna give a quick plug to Benny too. Please check out his Road to Growth podcast. That's in there in my subscription. You got 61.1 million American families are fans of music podcasts. So if you're into music or into some kind of, and that could be broken down to other genres too, like storytelling. You got people that I know a podcaster personally that's here in the area that does a horror themed podcast, crime, sort of like crime themed podcast. Things where you're telling stories. If you have a book, switch it to an audio book, make it into a podcast. So all those, like I said, all those options are available, if you have certain things in place. But people love to, right now, they're really consuming a lot of content right now. And so I think, if people are interested in what you offer, or maybe a twist on the things that you have, maybe you can twist it in a certain fashion, and I'll explain that later. But, if you can create an audience, create fans, then that's how you can get them sort of tied in, connected to your podcast. And then from there, you can link them in to other things. It could be your business, or it could be, some of your offerings. So 74% of podcasters actually listen to podcasts to learn something new. And like I said from the beginning, I'm a learner. I love consuming different podcasts. I love different interviews. So if you look at my podcast selection on my iPhone, it ranges from spiritual stuff all the way down to business things, business podcasts. So I love learning a whole gamut of things. I do that just because I love to be able to get those insights and just sort of merge it into what I'm doing, and then redistribute that out through certain episodes, or bring on people that I'm interested in, as far as, concept wise. If I want someone that might be into spiritual, energy work, and I've done that before, I'll bring someone in that, that I've connected to online, and bring them in for an interview, help promote them, help promote their business. If it's something with, real estate, if it's something with, it could be any industry. I've actually had Julie on one of my podcast episodes with Studio Ace, and help promote her organization and what she's doing. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those where people love learning. They love learning. They love trying to get new insights from others. So, sorry. So the first thing you want to sort of consider is just create a name for your podcast. And that's something that you'll figure that out. Everybody has their own little thing. Sometimes it's based off of a certain concept, and then they, develop a name from there. With me, I was, I was sort of thinking of the name, and then, creating a logo and everything else. But I really, the idea of it was the Creative Brew, and I wanted to, use the concepts of creativity, creative entrepreneurship, insights from other people, and share it over, and I really just talk about stories, their stories, over a cup of coffee, beer, or tea. That was really the concept, and I just named it the Creative Brew. So so that was something that I think sort of stuck. And I think in that fashion, I was able to grab or get people from just all kinds of various ranges. So it might be people that's in, vegan life, or it could be people that it might be athletes, it might be thought leaders. I wanted to gain all their insights and sort of just mash it together. Um, and at the same time too, I'm learning in the process. But yeah, this is the logo for it. But yeah, create a name for your podcast, create something that's going to stick. And like I said, but it's completely up to you. So you'll that's the thing you'll have fun with. You can do something that sort of pertains to your business, or it could be something sort of off brand. Uh, and at the same time to, feature your name so everybody knows that you're associated with that too as well. I keep going backwards, I'm sorry. Then what's your topics? So after you figure out what your name of the podcast is going to be, figure out what topics do you want to explore. Obviously we can't. I've had people all the time like, "Hey, you gonna be like Joe Rogan?" No, I don't want to be like Joe Rogan. Now, not to say I don't enjoy him. I enjoy, I always enjoy the people he brings on, but I'm real big on, sometimes I have to make sure I stay in my lane. If I have a certain arena or a certain niche that I sort of stay around, I'll do my best to sort of be the master of that lane. I don't want to get out to where I, start bringing on everybody. I think right now that's not what I'm looking for. I do want to bring on entrepreneurs, small business owners. I want to bring artists, athletes, people that's in yoga. Those are the things that I'm interested in. I want to bring those people on. And as well as other people that's had podcasts. So that I've always been big on creating partnerships. And so I'll bring on people even with Vinny, I brought him on to my podcast and vice versa. And like I said, I'm real big on just, helping to promote and share other podcasts. But find out what topics interest you, find out what topics are around your business, and see if you can merge everything. See if you can infuse it with the things that you love, and merge it into a podcast. And like I said, there's no right or wrong technique to it. Whatever feels good for you, and you'll find your voice. Don't feel like you have to have something perfect on episode 1. My first 5 episodes was horrible. When I look back at it now, but now I'm learning how to develop that voice, how to develop my own voice. And that, like I said, that's something you'll do as well. And I'm always listening to other podcasts because I'm interested in seeing, okay, how are they communicating? How are they speaking? Are they being more conversational, or is it sort of formatted? So it's just one of those where I'm trying to, at the same time too, I'm trying to get that mix. I'm trying to find that authentic voice of who I am. And that's something that you'll do, once you stay consistent with it and get it going. So then we'll go with the format of the show. And like I said, experts, they've said, some people say, hey, do a 10-minute podcast. Others be like, do a 25-minute podcast. Some people do 50-minute podcasts or longer. It really depends. I know Joe Rogan could be a pretty long podcast at times. But if it's something that's entertaining, and I'm real big on 3 things. If you can entertain, inspire, and inform, if you can do one of those things, that's good. If you can do all 3 of those things, that's great. And that's something that I'm real big on if I'm doing any kind of social media work, if I'm doing content work, doing work on the podcast. If I can work around those 3 things with my podcast, then that's awesome. So going back, figure out what the format of your show is. Right now, I usually average between about 30 to 45 minutes on average. Sometimes it goes up to about an hour. It really depends on what I'm doing or who I bring on. And then right here on the side is my show format. So I'll go into just a short intro. Then if I've got sponsors, I'll go into sponsor pre-rolls. And then this main part is really the meat part of the podcast with me. And like I said, everybody's different, but with me, I'll pretty much ask people what, their journey, how did they get to that point where they are now. So I like to be able to share to my audience about people's journeys. Then I ask, what's inspiring you right now? What books, what resources, what things are helping you out right now? Maybe a book that's probably maybe transformed your life right now. So I like to hear things like that. Then I get the creative tips, and I'll go into later into one of the future slides what I do with the creative tips. But creative tips, I ask for someone to give me a creative tip that can help our audience. And so usually guests give me 1 to 2 tips. Then we go into the creative life. And what I mean by that, if, money was no issue, how would you live your life right now? What would you be doing right now? And I get some very interesting answers with that. And that's something that's how you create that content. You ask great questions, you'll get great answers. So those are things that, people be like, I never thought about that. Or people, they already have that answer. Then I ask, before we sign off, I ask for words of wisdom. So just a couple of words of wisdom. It could be 1 or 2 minutes before we sign off on the podcast. And then I ask how people can connect with you with our, specific guest. And then, like I said, I always add their contact information and things like that. So, but figure that format of the show. That's my format. When I started out the podcast, it did not start like this. So please don't feel like I'm an expert or anything. This is something that I've sort of developed over time. But at first, it was like a little 5-minute motivational rant. That's what it started out as. And then it started stretching out to, 15, 20 minutes. And now I average about 45 minutes on a podcast when I add in music and everything else. So, but yeah, as far as how long the show, how long will your podcast be? It's really up to you. If you feel like you can, I've listened to podcasts where it's 10 minutes long and they still give me, a lot of valuable information. And sometimes I just want to hear something that's 10 minutes in the morning, something that, sort of get me going. Or if I'm really interested in someone's story, I'll listen to it for 45 minutes. I may stop it, I may pause it, but then I'll put it back on play and keep listening to it. So it really depends. It's really up to you, depending on what your content is, what you want to put out to the world. I'll leave that to you. So. And then podcast equipment and software. Like I said, this is another thing that sort of it ranges depending on how ambitious you are, what you want to do. Me personally, I'm real big on flexibility. I'm always sort of on the go. Generally, for the most part, I record at it's a coffee shop / comic book shop here in Oceanside called Panels. So I generally record there. So I usually, for the most part, I generally have my digital camera. I've got my microphone there, my iPad, and for the most part, that's generally, and I got my tripod too. But that's generally how I record a lot of my episodes. You can get. I'm gonna say you probably need to get some headphones, some noise reduction headphones. You've got, I'm going to say for anyone beginning, starting out, I would suggest you get these. I've sort of learned the hard way. It sucks to sort of edit out background noise. But now with a lot of the coffee shops, I've just learned to sort of use that as part of the podcast. I use that as some of the ambience of it. At first I try to edit it out. Now I'm like, okay, it's part of it. It's part of the coffee shop. I'd rather have a busy coffee shop and me record than me go to a coffee shop and it's just dead. That's not the kind of atmosphere I'm looking for anyway. So if it's busy, I've gotten to now to where, actually before the virus, to where when I come in, people would just sort of, lower their voice a little bit and they would still stay in there and talk and drink coffee. And that's what I wanted. I don't want everybody to leave. So yeah, those are some of the things personally for me that I have to deal with, but I would definitely recommend some noise reduction headphones, a good microphone. For the most part, I would get a microphone, that's got a USB connection. I've got um, uh, a snowball ice microphone. It's very cost efficient. I think the one I got is about 60, $70 or something like that. You can get some high end microphones. And like I said, it really depends on what you want to start out with. I'm real big on flexibility, being sort of mobile. So I want to get something that's mobile with me. So with the snowball ice microphone, it connects right to my laptop, and I can go around and record anywhere I want to. So I'm just real big on just being able to move around. Sometimes, like I said, if I do a person-to-person interview, a lot of times I may bring my digital camera, especially if I'm doing video. Obviously, right now I can't do that right now, so I have to switch to Zoom to do a lot of my video and do that process. I can actually get the recorded content as well as the audio and cut it up and turn it into a podcast. Just different things. Like I said, there's different software to use. There's all kinds of stuff. I actually started out with GarageBand at first. I did a couple little episodes. I tried it from GarageBand. Didn't like it. I ended up switching to Adobe Audition, and I use Adobe. Actually, supposed to be Adobe Premiere. Though for the most part, that's generally what I use. And now I use Zoom Video too. So what I'll do is, if I do an interview, I will connect through Zoom Video. I'll get the recorded and audio content, and then I'll pull it into Adobe Premiere, and then that's where I actually produce my actual show, is through Adobe Premiere. If I need to do any kind of editing sound-wise, I'll use Adobe Audition for it to do any kind of editing, and then pull it back into Adobe Premiere. But that's where I actually produce the whole show. From there, I can export out my video, I can export out my audio, and then I can get little snippets of the show and use that to distribute out through Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of my social media channels. So definitely getting a good microphone. If you're starting out, get something that's cost efficient, but you want it to be good. Obviously, if you keep investing in it, you'll start getting more high end. But you've seen a lot of the bigger podcasters. They got some real high end microphones. That's just to keep to reduce the noise. You want to be able to control your environment. I've learned with a coffee shop, I can't do that too well, but I sort of use that background noise as part of the podcast now. So I tried to control it at first. It wasn't working. So, but like I said, everybody have a process. Some people record from home. I would definitely recommend recording in a small environment to where you can control the sound in there. If you get into a larger room, make sure you've got something that's going to suppress the noise to where you're not hitting that echo throughout the room. So do your best to control the environment, and you'll be able to produce some high quality audio. But you got Audacity, which is real user friendly. Obviously, GarageBand. If you wanted to start it out. If you got a Mac, a lot of people got, or a MacBook Pro, you got GarageBand. As far as you got Anchor too. You can actually produce a podcast from Anchor. I know Vinny does I know he's got a different setup with certain things, but like I said, all these are just recommendations. And then producing the podcast, you've got different ways to go about it. You've got your MP3 format, which is your audio content. That's your audio. That's how, if you want just to produce just one audio podcast, that is the format you will probably need for the most part to be able to upload. Personally, for me, I upload through SoundCloud. So I upload all of my MP3s from SoundCloud, and then that's how I actually produce my the audio formats of the podcast. And then also too, with my radio show, I just send them the MP3 format as well, and then the show notes, show notes, and the information I send that to them as well. And then that's been the easiest format for them. For video content, I use the MP4 format, and that's if I'm producing the video show through YouTube, through Facebook. And then if I use certain snippets to create that I upload through Instagram TV, and I create little. I use like little snippets, like the creative tips and some other things, and I post that out for marketing. So those are usually the two formats I work with. There's other ones, but this has been the really the simplest formats you can work with: video, MP4, audio, MP3. And then podcast cover art. Like I said, I generally, for the most part, I believe your podcast cover dimensions are 1500 by 1500 pixels. That's generally what iTunes, Apple Podcasts, I believe that's what they need. It's either 1500 by 1500 or 1600 by 1600, something like that. But generally, this is pretty much the default size. Podcast cover art is really just producing a great cover for your podcast. And like I said, there's literally thousands upon thousands of different covers. So if you having issues, trying to figure out how to create one, you can, go through, like I said, you got resources like Canva or Fiverr, if you want to do your own little podcast cover, or I can create one for you. With me, being a graphic designer, it's sort of easier for me to, create the logo, create the podcast artwork, and do the marketing and things like that. That was easy. The hard part was actually producing the podcast and getting those things actually going. That was the harder part, was making sure everything was the right formats and producing the sound quality, because I was no expert at that at all, and I'm still learning. Let's see. And then distribution, there's all kinds of platforms to choose from. You've got Anchor, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Buzzsprout, Overcast. There's all kinds of others to choose from. You could literally take your pick. For me, the easiest for me, I've always used SoundCloud. And what I'll do is I'll upload, I'll start a SoundCloud account. I'll upload the MP3s, put in the information, and then to get on Apple iTunes, you have to set up an ID account with them and register your podcast, and then you give them the RSS feed that we talked about in the beginning. You give that to them, because that's going to be your syndication feed for your podcast. So these are pretty much connected. So anytime I upload a episode from SoundCloud, it'll automatically release on Apple iTunes. So both of those are connected. Yeah, that's how I jump on the Apple Podcast. I'm on SoundCloud. That's generally the platform I use. And then I send that audio to the Helium Radio. As far as video content for the video show, I use Facebook, and I produce it as the Facebook Watch video. I upload it on my YouTube channel, and then I use snippets of the video and I put it on Instagram. Like I said, there's literally all kinds of ways to distribute it. It really depends on where your audience is at. If you're trying to build your business or you're trying to build a brand, figure out where your audience is at. If a lot of them are on LinkedIn, I would suggest putting video content on LinkedIn, or putting audio content somehow on LinkedIn, or getting the audience from LinkedIn to get them to go to your podcast page. So figure out where your audience is at. Right now, for the most part, I've sort of noticed that a lot of my audience is on Facebook and Instagram. So that's usually what I target. And then content ecosystem. And this is something that I've been developing and working on. And it's, like I said, I'm a big fan on content. I believe if you got an idea, just run with it. I don't care how professional it is. I do not care. I want to get you in the process of actually creating content. Keep failing until you figure out, okay, now I feel like I'm hitting my stride. Don't ever feel like you have to be perfect at the beginning. It's not gonna work. If you see even I'll go back even with Joe Rogan. If you see his very first episode compared to now, it's completely different. So don't ever feel like, okay, I've got to have this perfect system right off the bat. No, you don't. Just get in the habit of just start creating, start figuring out what your voice is, start figuring out what you want to promote. If you want to strictly promote your business, then create content around that industry. If you want to infuse certain things that you love outside of your business, you can do that too. Figure out ways to pull in information and the things that you love and infuse it into the podcast. But this is my content ecosystem, and I generally see this almost like a living brand. So I've got different things that this is pretty much how I distribute a lot of my content, a lot of my information. But I've got my video show, radio show, Instagram TV, video, podcast, and Facebook Live video that I'll do from time to time. But I've got my main video show, and this is pretty much just a breakdown of what I do generally with an episode. I've got my video show. The audio goes to SoundCloud and Apple Podcast. Then I also send it to my radio show on Helium Radio. The video goes to Facebook Watch, YouTube, and then snippets of the podcast goes to my Instagram TV series. And that's usually where I put out the creative tips. From this content, I generally create blog content, and I'll create blogs for the Oceanside Chamber and for LinkedIn. So that's generally how I create my content. Like I said, I definitely still fine tuning the process, but this is something that sort of allows me just to keep cranking out things. And oddly enough, I've had people, I don't even really promote my branding, my branding studio, but I find that I get more traction putting out videos, and then they ask me, "Hey, are you still doing graphic design?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still doing it." And then they'll ask for a quote on our project or something. So it's sort of weird that the video content and all the things I'm doing for the podcast is actually pushing my own main brand even more. So it's sort of weird. But yeah, that's generally it. For the most part, you can see the Creative Brew every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, and you can find the Creative Brew on the Creative Brew TV. So,
Montal, that was fantastic. That was 10 out of 10. And I gotta say, I gotta commend you guys. You just, everything is so on brand, with your podcast, from the Creative Brew to you being at panels, the topics you discuss. It's that's quality stuff, and it's a good podcast to tune into for everybody here. Definitely worth a check. I watch most of them. Yeah, so let's get to our next speaker. We'll get into some questions afterwards, but Quantal, if you want to put all your contact information and how our attendees can find you in the chat, and we'll share that after as well.
Cool.
But let's Benny, are you ready to rock and roll? Yeah, there we go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Wow, Quantal, that was tough act to follow. So hopefully you guys take some great notes on that. My slide is going to be a little bit shorter, yet there's going to be quality in there. So hopefully you can enjoy it. All right. So I'll start right now, give you a little background about me. So I was born in San Diego, moved around a lot. I lived in the Bay Area, lived in New York, lived in Orange County, lived in Europe, lived in Afghanistan, lived in a variety of different places. Moved back to San Diego, started a real estate team about 8 years ago. This idea for the podcast came about probably about a month before I put it out. So it was one of those things that I felt there needed to be a podcast about overcoming adversity, talking about the struggles, being that we have so much on Facebook where you only see a snippet of someone's life. Instead of seeing just the positives, it can be depressing for people that are going through struggles. So I wanted to tell a story from individuals that has succeeded. It could be mini successes, big successes, but at least talk about more in depth of the struggles and the down moments of their life. So that's kind of where the idea, and I'll dive a little more into that a little later. So it's kind of give you an idea. This was kind of learning as the process goes. The platform is called Road to Growth, Success as an Entrepreneur. Again, I've had business coaches on the platform. I've had real estate, mortgage lenders. I've had anyone. The core of it is they have to be an entrepreneur, own their own business. I mean, that's the big idea of it. And they've had to have some kind of struggle that they've had to go through. I started out probably my first, and again, I've been doing it for more than probably around a year. And last January was when I started in 2019. So I did everything in person. I got the mic, got the stand, got a briefcase, and we just did everything in person on the go. Then I started getting requests to do it virtually. So I built the platform off of Squadcast. So I started doing some remotely, and now everything's going remotely. So you can kind of read the idea behind it, the podcast. Road to Growth, Success as an Entrepreneur is a podcast that focuses on the struggles that all entrepreneurs go through. Each week we will interview different business owners, hear the stories of adversity and how they work through them. Yeah, I think there's so much false bravado out there. Again, diving into the Facebook thing, that it's you can really deflate yourself if you judge people's outsides on Facebook by your insides and by your own insecurities. So figure out what's your why. I know Quantel kind of talked about it, about his why he kind of started his podcast. Again, I've relayed my why. The more hyper-focused on your why, the more listens you get, the more leverage you're going to get off of the platform. For myself, I mean, I haven't monetized this platform at all. For me, I started out just trying to give back because I interviewed new agents, and as you're probably aware, there's somewhat of a low barrier of entry for the real estate industry. And there's a lot of people that come in, there's a big failure rate. And I kept on talking to people, and they were getting deflated about how are they doing so good when I'm not doing good. I just been pushing through this and I'm not getting there. I go, well, the property that they're showing is the property that they've been showing for the last like 6 months. They're not selling it, but the way they portray themselves looks like they are. So I wanted to kind of get the story out there. One thing I started to realize by hearing people's stories, it allowed me to, when I had a down moment, I was able to get a kind of pick me up. I've had people on there that talked about killing themselves. I had one guy that he had bankruptcy, his wife was divorcing him, and it just seemed like everything was wrong. He goes, you know what? Tonight's my last night of living. He goes, before I go, I just want to listen to this song. He basically put his headphones on, sat on his chair, listened to the song, and he just started crying. He listened to it, he said, for a couple hours, fell asleep to it on, woke up, had to listen to it again. And this one song basically gave him kind of an epiphany of where he wants to take his life now. You know, I had other people that were at the extent of jumping off the balcony. They had their one hand on the balcony. They had, again, an epiphany saying, you know what, all the wrong that I had, I have to take blame for it. I mean, just small things. Like I had one person, it was something that was powerful for me, was the idea that her mom, they got in a car crash. Her mom died in the car crash. Her and her brother were still alive, and the dad was there. She got severely injured. About a couple of years, I think at the age of 14, her dad remarried and now had two other daughters. And I guess her new stepmom told her dad that this is not going to work out. I don't want your daughter to be here anymore. So at the age of 14, he kicked her out to the curb. Just one night, she goes, you got to leave. She was living in the street, and luckily she found this nice couple, I mean, after I think a year or so on living on the street, that invited her in. And it was her process of getting back in, I mean, to where she is now. She has a PhD, she helps people, everything like that. But the whole time she's telling me this story, has a smile on her face. She's speaking so positive. And I'm like, how are you so positive about it? I mean, your brother was stuck there with your family and you were kicked to the curb. Like, how are you so positive about it? He goes, I just wasn't good enough at that time. I slowly had to realize that I am good enough for people. And so, like, all these powerful stories I'm lucky enough to hear kind of allowed me to keep pushing through and say, okay, you know, I'm going to do another episode. So that's kind of my big why about it, is just hearing these stories and knowing that life is not what it is, it's about how you perceive it. So that's going to push. So figure out what your big why is, and that's going to probably help you out a lot. Now, going to the idea. Now, this is not broken down as much as Quantal again. So again, go get the idea. Is it going to be in person or remotely? Squadcast is a platform that I use. Zoom is a platform that a lot of other people use out there. I was kind of just jumping around trying to figure out what was going to be the best platform for me. Once I figured out that idea of what I wanted, I go, okay, well, now what's the next step? So you want your intro and your outro and a logo. Fiverr. If you guys haven't used Fiverr, go to Fiverr. It has anything and everything on there, and it's crazy cheap. If you have and Quantal, I'm sorry, close your ears. I'm sorry about that right there. But if you have the time and you know Quantal, go to him. If you don't have the time and you need to go to Fiverr, then you can check out Fiverr, but it has a little bit of everything on there. Be hyper-focused in what you want. Some of the workers and some of the people are out of the country. Language might be their second, third language right there. So just be hyper-focused on what you're looking for. But it can be very cheap. Edit your podcast. So I had before I got into real estate and construction, all that kind of stuff, I hosted and edited a podcast. Not podcast, a TV show in college. So I kind of had an idea of editing. I haven't done it. I didn't do it for a long time. But I go, how hard can it be? Well, it takes a little while to get back into it. But Adobe Premiere Pro is the platform that I use to edit the podcast. So you can take the file from either, if you're using a in-person microphone, or if you're using Squadcast or Zoom. Zoom and Squadcast can be really easy because it's really just taking the file after it's done recording it, taking the audio version, and then uploading it to Adobe or wherever you're going to edit it. If you are using a remote recorder, it just takes a couple extra steps. The mic that you want to look at, do a little research on it. There's different kind of mics out there. So there's mics that, and I forgot the actual, it's been such a long time since I've done those classes, but there's two different kind of mics. There's mics that take all the outside noise, and then there are other mics that are hyper focused on what you're saying. If you're in remote areas and there's a lot of outside noise, you want to make sure that you have the mic that's hyper focused on your mouth, so it will go directly towards you, and so it'll cut out some of that outside noise. So there's two kind of mics that you just want to be aware of. Now, editing the podcast, again, Adobe Premiere, then you export it out. In Adobe Premiere, you can put kind of extra verbiage, some metadata, I think that's the right word, in it. It kind of helps out, I guess, a little bit. Export that file, import it to whatever platform you're using as your hosting platform. So the hosting platform I use is Podbean. There's Lesbian, I think it is, and some other ones that are free platforms, Anchor. Podbean I do pay for. I don't know the full specifics of it, but it was saying that on some of the platforms you got to be aware, because it says that, I guess, the hosting platform owns the information or owns the data of your podcast if you put it on there. So verify with it the platform that you're using. Podbean, supposedly, I own it outright. That was one of the big things I saw on there. So I didn't really dive too much into it, but then I started looking later on and saying that information might have been false, or there's different ways of reading it. So just, I would say, verify that with whatever hosting platform you use. Then the hosting platform, before you actually put your episode, your podcast live, I would suggest getting about 3, maybe 4 podcasts set up, maybe even 5, and then release 3 at the start, and then have some in the backlog, just so you're not stressing out about if you're doing it on a weekly basis. And then also too, I think Google Play, it's been a little while, but to get approved by Google Play, you need at least, I think, 3 episodes up, and some other platforms, you need a couple episodes already up. So yeah, at least try to maybe do 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there, just so you have stuff in the pipeline. And then once you put it up on your hosting platform, the RSS feed that you have on the hosting platform, you'll upload that to Apple, Anchor, all the stuff that Quantel put on there. It's really simple. If you just put where to upload for Apple, where to upload for Google Play in Google, you'll see all the different the platforms. Spotify is a newer one that you can start doing now too. And if you're on Facebook, there's a lot of podcast groups out there that you can kind of join up to. I mean, I know for myself, I was interviewing people by word of mouth, and then I started finding out these other Facebook podcast groups out there. And now there's kind of like a network of a few different people where I've actually done cross promotion with. And sometimes they'll have a really good guest on there. And I mean, you'll talk to the guest and find out it's a good fit for you too. So those definitely some podcast platforms out there are really beneficial for anyone looking to jump on. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I mean, again, it's not in depth as Quantel, but hopefully there's some good information.
I think between you two, we should all be pros by now. That was awesome. Great job. Does anybody have questions for Quantel or Vinny? I'll open it up. Okay. Well, I have one. I think, Vinny, how long are your podcasts generally? Quantal said his can range, about up to 45 minutes. What are yours generally?
Yeah, so my original plan when I first came out, I was like, I'm gonna do 20 minutes. And then there was one of the guys I had on there where I was talking to him, and I have a really easy flow. It's basically like who you are, what brought you to this point, 1 or 2 hurdles you had to overcome. If you could talk either to your younger self or someone trying to get in the business, what kind of advice would you give, and then what's next? So that's my flow of it. So I was talking to this one guy a couple episodes in, maybe like 15, 20 episodes in, and we're not jiving. Sometimes when you meet a person, you're trying to connect with them, but you can kind of feel they're holding back a little bit. And so I think I was getting like 25 minutes in or close to 30 minutes in. And finally we start joking around a little bit. I'm like, okay, now this is the good stuff. And so that one went like 45 minutes. So I started to tell myself, if the content is there, I just need to let it flow out. So, I mean, I've probably maxed out at about 45 minutes. But I try to keep it between 20 to 45 minutes based off of the person, based off the content, and based off the flow of the questions.
It's super interesting that there's a place for all durations of pods. I listen to some podcasts that are 20 minutes, and then some of my favorites are like Joe Rogan and Last Podcast on the Left. Those can be 2 or 3 hours long. So, you have a place for all of them. It's pretty interesting stuff. Does anybody else have any questions? I'll unmute. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're unmuted.
So my question is like there's SoundCloud, there's Apple Podcasts, there's Google Podcasts. Is there, I guess, out of any and all of those, is there one of those that are the easiest platform? Is there one of those that is more broad reaching?
Do you want to take a Quantel or?
I know, yeah, for the most part, I think it just depends. I think depending on the platform, I think a lot of them tend to spread your content out through other third-party apps and things like that. Yeah, it's one of those where you almost have to just research a little bit. I know personally for me, I think I know I work with SoundCloud. That's usually where I have all my podcasts at, and I know initially it really wasn't anything that was big as far as reach, but the more I got more consistent with the podcast episodes. So right now I'm hitting almost episode 60 now. So I've looking at my numbers. I've sort of noticed now that it's starting to stretch out. So I'll get people that's listening in Canada, in Ireland, in Mexico, in my hometown in Cleveland, Tennessee, then out here in Oceanside, other places in California. So I think just the more that you push it and promote it, and get people going to wherever you hold your podcast at. I think I think that's going to help with the reach more than anything else. I mean, I use like with Vinny, I put in a lot of search tag metadata and handles and stuff like that, and it really depends on what people are searching for. You have to sit there and, depending on what industry you wanna have your podcast in, figure out how. I always look at the how they're putting in their handles and see what they're doing. So, like I said, it's just different for everyone. But one of those I'm just big on. I'd rather just run the marathon and constantly get the content up, and then I think from there people end up finding it, and that's what I find people doing. I'll go to a coffee shop and they're like, "Hey, you do the creative brew and stuff, right?" And so I'll tell them where you can search it and stuff like that, and that's for the most part, that's how I get more of a reach. Just constantly promoting it.
I mean, once you get the RSS feed attached to the different platforms, it's usually set it and forget it. So I mean, I would say get it to as many platforms as you can. It's not going to hurt in the process. Some of the platforms take a little bit longer to get to, but yeah, once you get the RSS, up to the platforms, then it's really set it and forget it.
Great answers there. Hope that helps you out.
Hey,
Seems like it really just.
Quick note. Also, on a side note, Vinny made a good point as far as getting your content on different platforms. I know with the radio show, which is a different platform from my audio, I've got a whole completely different reach, but a lot of them is based out of the East Coast. So when I get the numbers from the radio show, I actually have like 10,000 people listening to it every week. So I don't even count those numbers a lot from the audio or the video. The video content, I usually get about 200, 300 views. And then the audio, I generally, I think I'll have about maybe in a week, I may have about 300 plays or something like that with the podcast. So with all that, I sort of combine all those numbers together and see where it's looking at. Right now, it's starting to grow now.
Very cool. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll it's 11 o'clock, so we'll get out of here.